Hello, and welcome to Chapter 15, our final chapter. In this chapter, we're going to be discussing conscious thought and unconscious thought. So, just to prep you for what we're going to be covering, we will be talking about consciousness and perception, dissociations in consciousness, unconscious reasoning, metacognition, and mind-body problem. All right, let's get going with consciousness and perception. So let's start off by talking about the different kinds of consciousness. First off, there is what we call consciousness, which is what the cognitive system is actually doing. So this would be any thoughts, any underlying strategies, schemas, anything cognitive that might be going on. That would be called access consciousness. Phenomenal consciousness is probably what you think of when you hear the word consciousness, because consciousness is oftentimes defined as your awareness of what's going on. And so with phenomenal consciousness, we're talking about your awareness of what's going on cognitively. So what you know about what you're processing or what you're thinking about or those kinds of cognitive activities, your awareness of those things. There's monitoring consciousness, which is your ability to reflect on those cognitive activities. And of course, it relies heavily on phenomenal consciousness in order for you to monitor your own consciousness. And then there is self-consciousness, which is your general knowledge of yourself. Self-consciousness is your awareness of your own characteristics, how you appear to others, things like that, your own motives. That self-consciousness is specifically your consciousness about yourself. We oftentimes in regular language will refer to self-consciousness as being sort of embarrassed almost, or like very much sort of like looking at ourselves unfavorably, but that's not necessarily what we mean by self-consciousness in cognition. We're talking about your awareness of all the things that have to do with yourself. So previously in this class, we talked about signal detection theory, and I thought it would be fun to show you an actual sort of diagram of what we're talking about when we're talking about signal detection. So the blue curve is like just background noise that isn't part of what we're supposed to be detecting, and the red curve represents the thing that you are supposed to be detecting, and of course it's going to have with it some noise, right? Like no stimulus is perfectly stimulus. There's going to be stimulus plus some extra junk in there. And signal detection theory talks about the likelihood that we're going to perceive a signal correctly and accurately, right? And one of the factors that helps to determine your likelihood of detecting a signal correctly is how sensitive your sensory system is. So people who with better hearing are probably going to hear signals earlier than people with poorer hearing. People with better vision will see a signal before people with poorer vision, right? There are other factors though. Response bias. Are we willing to report that we are perceiving that signal? Are we willing to say, I hear it, or I see it, or I smell it? Smell is a good example of maybe a circumstance where maybe we don't want to admit we're smelling anything. Oh, no, it's fine. It's good. I don't smell that your family obviously had fish for dinner and I just walked in on it and it doesn't smell very good. No, it smells fine. It's like Febreze in here. It's perfect. So we might not want to report what we are in fact detecting. And in research, that can be a problem, right? Where maybe a participant has detected the signal, but they don't trust that they correctly detected the signal. And so they get a miss, right? Where they actually detected it, but they say they didn't. And the signal was present, but they don't want to over-report. And so they miss one because of that kind of motivation. Most of our cognitions occur outside of awareness. And so I'm using signal detection theory as sort of a model for how often we're having thoughts, we're making decisions, and we're not noticing it. We're not detecting that we're actually processing that information or focusing on that stimulus. So most cognitions are like that. So a lot of times we have what are called dissociations in consciousness, where we are having conscious thoughts, but we're not connected to them. We aren't aware that we're having those conscious thoughts, whether it's solving a problem or detecting a signal or whatever it is. Authorship processing is a term that refers to the processes that allow us to attribute outcomes to their cause. So when we're trying to figure out what caused something else, we look for those processes that would explain that outcome. One of the things that comes from our tendency to figure out what caused something is we can develop what's called an illusion of conscious control, where we believe that the parts of our cognitions that we are aware of are in control of certain outcomes. So for example, if I know I'm thinking about something and then that something actually ends up happening, we come to the conclusion that somehow our thoughts cause that outcome. We see this a lot in childish thinking, where they think that, mom and dad got divorced because the child was thinking, how angry they were with one of the parents or something. And they're like, oh no, I caused my parents to get divorced. And of course they didn't. That's a good example of, that kind of magical, I'm thinking about it, it happened. I must have somehow wished it into being. I must have somehow, the power of my thoughts. There are whole books dedicated to fostering your belief that you can control things with your thinking. And if you're one of the people who believes that, I'm not trying to, make it seem like it's a bad, motive, but there's no evidence you can wish things into being. And so I'm not willing to say keep doing it. It can cause what we call magical beliefs, right? When you think that you generate outcomes just by thinking about something, it can cause you to think that you could actually make stuff happen, and you can start to develop magical thinking. And when it does work, when the correlation is there, so you thought something and then it happened, and you think it's because of your thoughts, it can really solidify the behavior, and you can really start to get magical thinking where, all I have to do is like blink 3 times and it'll happen. That's magical beliefs. It can also cause superstitious behaviors, where if the outcome doesn't occur, and you hadn't been thinking it into being, you might think, oh, it didn't happen because I wasn't thinking about it. Oh no, I should have been thinking about it, and then the thing would have happened. Oh no, I'm going to have to always do that from now on. I have to remember to think about it so it'll happen. My grandma always, I think, was joking when she would say, I visualized the parking spot that I wanted, and that's why there's one right in front of the store. And if I was ever in the car and there wasn't one right in the front of the store, I'd always go, Grandma, what happened? Why don't we have a spot in front of the store? And she'd be, oh, I forgot to think about it. I was thinking about what we were talking about, and I forgot to think about it. She had like this sort of superstitious, if I think about it, and you can see superstitions expanding out, where people attach superstitious behavior to like things that they're wearing, or behaviors that they do before something important, like taking a test or going in for a job interview. They have to do this sequence of events. You see it with athletes a lot, where if they're on a winning streak, they try to figure out what they're doing that's keeping the winning streak going. And so they'll do things like wear the same socks. Or I recently heard that a NFL quarterback wears the same underwear all season without washing it. I'm hoping that's a joke. Not a great idea. But the other thing that the illusion of conscious control can do to us is cause us to persist even when the situation is futile, where our effort is not needed for the outcome. And so we will persist in things thinking that our effort is the defining factor, when in fact the outcome was going to happen anyway. There have been studies where they have problems on a computer that a person's told, okay, here's the problem, we want you to try and solve it. And the truth is there is no solution to the problem. You know how sometimes, maybe it's an unscramble a word, and maybe it's not possible to make a word out of these letters, or it might be a maze and there really is no way out of the maze. The lines never connect, something like that. And people who believe that their thoughts can make things happen will persist longer in those kinds of futile activities than people who don't have this illusion of conscious control. So I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of a physical manifestation of dissociations in consciousness. And this is a condition called blind sight. So a person who has blind sight can't consciously see. They will insist, I don't see it. That, no, I'm blind. Why are you asking me this? But they can unconsciously see. So, for example, the person with blind sight says, "But I'm blind. I don't see any stripes." And then the researcher says, "Well, just have a guess." And so the person with blind sight will say, "Well, I guess they're horizontal red stripes." Well, they're right because they are seeing, but they can't consciously see. It's somehow going to be processed in a way that their conscious mind is not aware of. Um, so the fact that they can correctly guess the location of objects, the fact that they can, when told, just guess, reach out and just guess where you think it might be, they will correctly reach for it. Generally describe it like in this example where they recognize that there are red horizontal stripes on the screen. Um, so they're somehow blind and yet also can see. So how is this happening? What's going on where a person who consciously cannot see actually is able to process visual information at an unconscious way? Well, one way is that there might be, in fact, some islands of intact tissue in their brain. And so, some parts of vision are being processed, but maybe the communication to the conscious part of the brain is not really present. And so that's where the disconnect is happening. So maybe we have damage to certain pathways from the eyes to the different parts of the brain within the whole visual system, and maybe other parts of the pathway aren't damaged. So it could be something very structural that's going on that's causing the person to have the sensation that they are not seeing when in fact they are seeing. There have been lots of really dramatic demonstrations where you can throw a ball at the face of a person with blind sight and they will catch the ball rather than let it hit themselves in the face, right? Like they clearly can see. Here's another example of a study with patient DF who has blind sight. And then on the right is a comparison patient that doesn't have any kind of brain damage that could cause blind sight. In the first row, they're told to hold the card, and you see the person on the left demonstrating what we're talking about. Hold the card at an angle that matches the orientation of the slot. And patient DF is holding it vertically, is holding it different degrees of angle off of horizontal, and is unable to match the angle of the slot, whereas the comparison patient has absolutely no problem with it. In the next condition, they're both told, imagine that you're mailing the card by placing it into the slot. And now look how accurate patient DF's angle is. He's as good as the person who can see at orienting the card in such a way that it would fit into the slot. So obviously something's going on where patient DF is under the impression that he cannot see. And when given the wrong kind of prompt, hold the card at an orientation that is the same as the slot. Given that kind of instruction, DF's like, I don't see the slot. But the unfailing ability to line it up correctly to quote unquote mail it, suddenly DF can do that. So something's going on. Now, because this is so perplexing and so interesting, I thought I would share with you in the playlist this video about blind sight. So I'll go ahead and stop here and I'll let you watch that video and I'll see you on the other side.